Hello.
Good evening. Thank you, everyone, for joining us here. I'm Shari Lowe, and today I'm chatting to the wonderful, award-winning, RNA award-winning Helen McAlpine, who is the voice behind all of my books. How are you doing?
Hello. It's lovely to be here. Yes, and thank you for your lovely books. So it's a
Is it
joy to
not?
read them.
Is it really strange actually talking to a person as opposed to just speaking as you voice over the books?
Uh, do you know, it makes a lovely change because it can get quite lonely in here, except for the voices in my head, which I scroll through like a Rolodex going, oh, I'll do that one. So it makes a lovely hello.
Oh,
It
hello, Grace. Hi, Catherine.
uh, makes a lovely change. So thank
Oh,
you for having me.
I have to say, when Helen is voicing my books, we exchange text messages about shocking bits or heartbreaking bits or about bits that the Helen say, no, where do you think this character comes from then? What kind of
Yes.
accent do you have?
It's very nice to have access to a writer because that's not always the case. Hello, Mina. Yeah, so it's you don't always, depends how the audiobook comes about, whether it's through an agent or whatnot, but you don't always get access to a writer, so it's lovely when you do because you can cut out the middleman, you don't have to you can very quickly get answers to questions,
I was
so
laughing at
that's
the
always
weekend
good.
because Helen, you sent me a voice text message, and I'm not very good at them. So I went to do it. I went to voice text you back because I'm thinking, right, I'm going to be trendy. I'm going to do what Helen's doing. I'll send her a voice message back. So I tried to record one, and I just started getting completely mixed up. I couldn't remember what I was saying. So I went, oh, delete that one, and then I tried. I think it took me 4 attempts. So in future, I'm just going to type a text. I'm
Yeah,
much slower.
listen, I'm quite like, well, that's what you do for a living, you're right. I speak, so
Exactly.
that might be why I use voice notes. I love a voice note, it's quick, and I think I've always got somebody because 'cause I've got 2 kids, I've got a 2-year-old and a soon to be 8-year-old, and, they always want something from me, so that's why I do a voice note because it's quick. Otherwise, I forget to finish the text, and I
No,
never
I
get
do
it
like
sent.
Lily as well. So today, everyone, is publication day for my brand new book. It's called One Moment in Time. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much to everyone who has read it already, who's reviewed it. All the bloggers on the blog tour had early access to it, and the reviews have been incredible. And I'm so grateful because it's utterly terrifying. Even now, this is book, I don't know, 36 or 37, and it's still utterly terrifying every time I have a new book out as to whether or not people like it. So the early reviews and the early blogs, they just mean so much to me. So thank you to everyone who's taken part on the blog tour. And this one was a little bit of a change of pace for me. Helen and I talked about this before because my last book that came out in January, which was One Day with You, which was that one, that had a real heartbreaking element to it. And a lot of people were saying they were in floods of tears. And I thought, well, maybe for the summer I'll do one that's slightly more lighthearted. So One Moment in Time, it still has some sort of, deep themes. It still has some sadness and some heart-wrenching moments, but it's a little bit more of a light-hearted book, one that you read on a sun lounger or reading the out in the garden in the summer. So I'll tell you a little bit about it, and then Helen and I were going to have a little discussion about her audio version of it. I think I'll probably just start by reading the blurb on the back. It would have been much better if you'd read the blurb on the back, Helen, because you've
I
got the
don't even
voice.
have the blurb, it's only on my iPad, I
Oh,
don't have the
we'll
blurb.
do it. Okay. Right, but please don't judge me against Helen's voice because she's the professional. I'm not. I don't normally do the speaking out loud stuff. Brenda Jones has decided to leave her husband just as soon as they return from a mystery trip organised by their daughter Zara to celebrate 30 years of marriage. Unbeknownst to Brenda, however, Zara has recreated almost every detail of her parents' original wedding and is flying them to Las Vegas to renew their wedding vows. So already we can see an issue. Brenda's ready for chucking the marriage. Zara's trying to
She ain't
celebrate
happy.
her 30th
Mhm.
anniversary. Zara's final challenge is tracking down the two friends who were pictured with her mum and dad in an old photo she found back in 1993. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world in South Carolina, Aidan Gregg is dealing with his own relationship woes. I won't tell you what they are, but they're crackers. Poor Aidan. He just gets put through it in the first few chapters. He receives this unexpected message from a complete stranger, that being Zara. Zara's basically tracked him down through Facebook, and she's saying to him, I think your dad is the person in this old photo I found of my parents' wedding. Turns out his mum is in the picture as well, so it all works out perfectly. So Zara says to Aidan, could you possibly, I know it's a big ask, but could you bring your parents to Las Vegas and we'll reunite them all on the day of their wedding anniversary, because obviously in this old photo, it's clear that they're old friends. What Aidan and Zara don't know is that 30 years ago, one moment in time changed everything. And so will rewinding the clock right the wrongs of the past, or are they all counting down to a rendezvous with disaster? So one moment in time. So
Wow.
Helen, tell me about recording this. How did you come up with the voices? How did you go about sort of putting this into audio?
Um, First of all, I loved it. If you haven't finished it yet, finish it because it's really good fun, and it's one of the great things about Shari's book is there's a real sense of family about it, even if it's not family, it's almost your chosen family, things like that, which really kind of bring it together, and people find their way to each other. And it doesn't always have to be blood or
Yeah.
relatives like that. It's friendships that become family and whatnot. So there's always a real heart to it. Um, with this one, as I was saying to you when we were just chatting before we did this, is there's always a great pleasure in being given a world to play with, so as soon as you put South Carolina in there, you've got a whole tranche of accents in there and that you wouldn't normally get to play with, so that's always lots of fun. Obviously, you've got to think about characters' ages and what age they are, and a big factor is differentiation because you can't just have everybody speaking like me. So it's about finding the wee things that either age them up or the wee idiosyncrasies, their speech patterns, their accents, things like that. I always find it's quite good to have the heart of the book in my own voice. It works
Okay.
either two ways, either my own voice, because I feel I can be more honest, or someone very different from me. So
All
I quite
right.
so sometimes, like, I do quite a lot of books, like entire books in English accents, and that's actually sometimes is easier because it's so different to me, so I have to do an entire book talking like this, and I can really get into it then because you have this kind of freedom to not be yourself. But with your books, for me, I feel like the heart of the story has to be rooted in myself because the female lead characters have always got so much heart, and I feel like I can give them more if I place it in my own kind of
Mhm.
voice, or certainly within that world of my own voice. So
And I think the majority of my female characters come from Helen and I don't live very far apart. We both live in the same kind of west of Scotland.
yeah, we grew up in the same kind of west of Scotland. I'm now in the middle of nowhere. I
And
live in the
as am I.
country.
We're both now country, live in the country in the west of Scotland, but that's, we come from bigger towns and cities. So I mean, I think the fact that most of my characters, not all of them, I have some books are predominantly American characters, some books are predominantly English characters, but the majority of them are the leads tend to be Scottish women, because I do think
Yeah.
there is an element of that, right? What and I think, as everyone knows, a lot of my books are inspired by, my big fun gang of pals who are always sitting at my breakfast bar, or my grannies for Josie and Val, who are recurring characters in my books.
Yeah.
So that I guess that is
I
that's
always
what
feel like
was that
when I
for
read
you. What do you doing the voices for them?
when I feel it when I read your books, though, I feel like I kind of quite instantly know these women. Like,
Mhm.
I grew up with them, they were my grannies, or they were my
Yep,
aunties, or they were my
yep.
mum's friends, or now that I'm getting slightly older, they're now my friends, so in that kind of development, and it's nice because some of them like Val and all that are just such lovely big characters, and we all know a Val. We all know someone who comes in like an absolute wrecking ball and takes over and knows exactly what to say at
Yeah.
the right time. And the amount of humour in the book is yes, exactly, Grace Power, strong Scottish lasses. That's what we want.
I
Uh,
feel that I'm on a kind of a I was doing a blog at the weekend and I said I'm on a mission to preserve in print that generation of women, not necessarily Scottish women, but just that generation of women who were fierce and funny.
uh-huh.
So I grew up predominantly, my grannies were strong. One of
Mhm.
my grands is no one longer with us. The other one is still going. She's 98 and she's still with us.
Ah,
And
go
these
Granny Low.
women were they and all of my aunties of that generation, I don't know, I used to say to my gran, is it because you've been through the war? Because there was nothing that phased them. Every single thing that happened, our answer was, right, come on, let's just get on with it, right? And you come.
Yeah.
And they
There is
knew
a there's
party.
there's a
Sorry,
yeah,
Helen.
there's a kind of, it's not that it's stiff upper lip, carry on, it's not that, it's a different type of thing, isn't it? It's more of a kind of, "We're all in this, you're not on your own with this," isn't it? It's more that, "Right, oh, you're having a tough time, but we're here with you, and we'll take you by the hand and get you through it," isn't it? It's that
Yeah.
kinda
Or
vibe behind it.
and it's also don't you dare let this beat you.
Yeah,
Come on you go, on you go. I
yeah,
remember at my nan's funeral, we we read a poem that was along the lines of "just get on with it," because that was our answer to everything. Just get
yeah,
on with it.
yeah,
But at the same time, they were ferociously funny women.
yes,
They I think it was because they had to entertain themselves. There's no televisions back then,
yeah,
and they like to sing, they like to joke. Even in the worst times, they would joke and they would sing, and they were always looking as to how to have a laugh. Both my grands
yeah.
had wicked senses of humor, just absolutely priceless senses of humor. So
I
I
always
think,
remember my gran was always like that as well. She would, I always remember one of the classics she said to my mum, somebody bought her a jumper once, and she opened it and she went, "Oh my goodness, would you look at the size of that? It would fit a gorilla." And then she looked at my mum and went, "Do you want it?" So it's always that kind of like brutal kind of like, oh,
yes,
like it's
yes.
just funny. They don't even know they're being funny half the time.
Yeah, I
Yeah, it's
remember
lovely.
the first time I walked into a million years ago, and I walked into my grand's house and I had on ripped up jeans, and I walked in and she went, "Oh, for the love, get them off till I get them sewed. Those are obscene. Obscene. Get them off, and I'll get them sewed up." And just that brutal honesty, and sometimes I'm 50 and I can still go in, and my gran will just tell me what she thinks, but I love that.
Yeah,
So people often ask, where do Val and Josie come from, or that older lady in this book. There is a grandmother figure, although you only really get to know her through a couple of letters that she wrote, or
mhm,
through anecdotes from the other characters.
yeah.
So that's where people often ask me about Josie and Val and where those older women come from, and that's where it comes from. I can the Val is very much sort of inspired by my gran, who's no longer with us, and I can't let her go. So it's my way of just keeping her around, keeping her with me. Is I
A
just
little
put
bit
her
of
in
an
a little book.
homage to her, why
Yes, and I
not?
just think, what would my
Yeah,
gran do? Okay, that's what Val's doing now.
that's what she's
But
doing now.
this book, I think,
I'm just clocking that someone's, Catherine has asked a question here on the comments. I'm just seeing what
yep.
she's asked.
Helen,
Uh,
Helen, do you do the American accent Aidan would have? So did you do a South Carolina
I can't
accent?
I tried my very best, Catherine. Yes, I did. Yeah, I gave him a bit of a nice southern drawl. Yeah. It's always funny when you're doing male characters as well, because there's only so low you can go without it sounding absolutely ridiculous. It's a bit like when guys do female characters. There's only, you don't want to be doing and then nobody understands you. So, but yes, I did do accent for Aidan. I gave him a southern South Carolina kind of tone. So hopefully it's not garbage.
Do you know what I think is one of the challenges that I don't mean I mean challenges in a good way. one of the more unusual challenges that you've had with our books is I'm just thinking about Eileen and Gary in this book. So Eileen and Gary are Aidan's parents, who are Scottish, but they've lived
Mhm.
in America for 20 years. So
Uh-huh.
let me show you as well. So Helen also, with my fabulous writing partner, Ross King, Helen voiced the Rise and the Catch. And right now you're working on the third book, aren't you, Helen? The Fall.
Yes, I am, but there'll be no spoilers today, so
No
don't
spoilers
ask.
on those ones. The Fall's out in June. And in The Rise and the Catch, I wrote those books with Ross King. But Helen and Ross do the voices on those, used to the audio versions. And when we were talking about how we should do the audio versions, we agreed that the perspectives of the characters, they alternate between chapters. So out of every 4 chapters, 2 are voiced by men and 2 are voiced by women. So in the audio versions of these books, of The Rise and the Catch, Ross does the chapters that are from male perspectives, and Helen does the chapters from female perspectives, from
Mhm.
Mirren and Sarah's perspective, the 2 female characters in those books. And it works brilliantly. But one of the challenges, as with this one with Gary and Aileen, is that they are Scottish characters who have lived in America for 20 or 30 years.
Mhm.
So that's one of the challenges, is the fact that their accents are not pure Scottish, but they're not yet American either. So
It's
they're somewhere in the middle, aren't they?
it's finding the hints, because sometimes you can go down a tricky route with it. So, for example, when they're talking about Eileen, he says she wasn't like his dad. She didn't lose her accent the way he did. So
Yes.
I made her Scots, but a slightly not quite a Glaswegian. She's refined it, but it's still very Scottish. Whereas the dad is just obviously just had been in America for too long. I've got a friend who lives in America, and he comes home and he's like, "So I'm gonna watch the soccer," and you're like, "Are you? Are you?
Are
Or are
you
you just
really?
gonna watch the football? Are you?" Like, that's really interesting, but I think you're going to watch the football. So it's yes, it is Gerard Butler. Yes, am I the only one who pictured that? Absolutely, that's when we had a conversation about it. We were totally doing Jerry Butler, so it's fine.
Oh,
But
Catherine. Sorry, I'm
well
not sure
done,
if you can all
Catherine.
see this. Catherine's has put a comment on saying, "Am I the only one who pictured Gary as Gerard Butler?"
It's absolutely dab on, dab
Oh,
on.
well,
I will say, I mean, I have done not yours, Shari, but there was one book I did quite early on, and one of the descriptions was she had a soft London accent with the hint of something sounding like French. Turns out it was West Indies. And that's
right,
very difficult to do, because no matter what you do, you're just gonna sound like you can't do the accent. Do you know what I mean?
okay,
Like, so
yes,
sometimes
a
it's
hybrid accent.
sometimes it's easier just to go, "Okay, let's go London on that," because as soon as you try and put it's a very specific thing, and trying to find somebody with that accent that you can listen to
Yeah,
is hard, as
yeah,
much research as you can do. So sometimes it's better to be cleaner just around when you're doing the audio, not in the descriptions necessarily, but just to pick out when you've got a description like that, it's easier and clearer for a listener
yeah.
to go, okay, this person is definitely speaking now. And um, it can be distracting. Do you know what I mean? If it's you're doing
If the
something
accent's
that's
not
yeah, if it's not
one specific accent, no, I
yeah,
understand that.
but I think with things like, Gary's character being that slightly anglicised thing, I think that totally works, because we know people like that, but, it's when you're doing characters that it's you're gonna be
It's
as
a
an actor.
combination you're not familiar with.
Yeah, it's easy. It's the best thing for a listener to be a bit cleaner about it.
Right.
So what's a question from Catherine? When Shari is writing her characters, does she picture any actors as the character and then describe them accordingly?
So I don't picture necessarily actors as the characters. What I do is I can see the characters. So I know it sounds like I'm always a bit reticent to describe this because it sounds a little bit kind of lovely. But the way that I write books is that I have an idea in my head. and then I plan nothing. So Helen thinks it's hilarious. I plan absolutely nothing. I have no idea what's going to. Every day I sit down at the computer, I've got no idea what I'm going to type. I've got no idea how a book's going to finish until I write the last page. And it's quite often it's as much of a surprise to me as it is to anyone else. And so it's like doing no preparation whatsoever for your homework. And don't get me wrong, I have tried to plan, to plot, to do all of those things. But at the end of the day, I find consolation in the fact that Jackie Collins never ever planned anything and it worked out okay for her. So this is the way that we go. And I'm 37 books and I can't change it. I've really tried.
But I think if you found a way that works for you,
Well, that's exactly
you know.
it. And it's the way I enjoy because I like to be surprised. But the process that I have for writing is that I get an idea and then all of a sudden it takes a few sort of days or a couple of weeks and it's just all in my head. I haven't even started writing it at this point and it's just all in my head. And then all of a sudden it comes to a point where I think, okay, I've got it. And then I sit down and it's like watching a movie in my mind and I'm just typing what I can see in my head. I can see it all in pictures. So I'm literally just typing the pictures I can see in my head. So I don't necessarily picture actors, but I certainly picture people. And for this book, Gary didn't look to me like Jerry Butler. I'm really glad that it gave that vibe off to someone, but that wasn't how I saw him as being having much darker hair, as being quite a kind of, you know, one of those guys that's kind of in their mid-50s but goes to the gym, so he's quite kind of stocky. So yes, I had a really different picture in my head of what he looked like, but I also try not to be too descriptive of that because I do think that if somebody describes down to every single aspect of a character's physical appearance, then I think that can change the reader's perception. So quite often I'll give sort of a hint of what a character looks like, you know, and I'll say, oh, she's got, you know, red hair, or the corkscrew curls or what have you, but I very much leave it up to the reader to form that image in their head. Apart from Xander Leith, who is one of the characters in The Catch and The Rise. What am I like? I'm like a game show hostess. I keep holding these books up. But it just makes it clearer because we're talking about so many different books. In The Rise and The Catch, there's a character called Xander Leith who I am obsessed and madly in love with and have been madly in love with him since the first day I wrote him. And I can see so clearly in my head what he looks like, every bit of him and what he does.
Calm down, Shari.
No, Helen McAlpine,
calm down.
Clean up your mind. I just mean his physical appearance. And I know every bit of this man. I can tell you how he'll react to things. I'm just madly in love with him. And I've said to Helen before, it makes, see when you're in love with one of your characters, it is so much easier to get to your desk in the morning to start work because you're dying to go. It's like being in a first date, you're dying to go to see what they're going to do next.
That's lovely though, to think that you love a character so much. It's
because they're all real to me.
Right. Oh,
they're
lovely.
all real in my head. I'm going to be 90 and I'll still be writing these books and all these characters will still be living in my head. And in this book, I absolutely adored Aidan, the sort of 30-something young lawyer from South Carolina. I adored him. And but I really related to Brenda and Eileen because they're at that stage in life. So a similar stage to me in terms of they're kind of in their 50s. And they are both, it's no spoilers to say, they are both not necessarily happy with the choices they've made in life. So they're 50 and they're wondering, is it too late to pick a whole new life? You know, have I made my bed and now I have to lie in it? Or can I still go and can I change my life? Meanwhile, the younger characters in this book, Zara and Millie, are in their 30s and they're thinking to themselves, like, what life do we want to choose? They haven't found necessarily their paths yet. And they've got some options, but they're not really sure, you know, what they want to do in life. So I always think it's a lot easier if there's a central dilemma at the heart of a book. And this book to me is just about, it's really the core of it is these women of all different ages and them trying to decide what they want their future to look like. Would you say that's fair, Helen? Would you say that's
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you do very well is you give people options and choices, you know, and you can see them in that book particularly. They discover it and they make their decisions and what's right for those characters, you know,
yes?
and you can see them kind of bursting out of their shells and discovering their right path, you know, despite what other people might be telling them and whatnot. So yeah, I think that's really nice. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. I think.
And I think it's about making hard decisions. You know, I think as well, I'm quite intrigued by people who make difficult decisions. I'm quite intrigued by women who get to their 50s and 60s and think, do you know, I want a different future. I want something else. This is not
Yeah,
this life is not suiting me anymore. And who
yeah,
decide they want to, you know, rip it up and change everything. So I think my natural personality is to take risks and chances, and you know, I was always the one doing, you know, the really irresponsible, stupid, but you know, adventurous thing. And I just think that the possibilities are endless for women now, and I think you can get to 50 and 55 and 60 and indeed 25, 30 and 35, any age at all, and just think, you know what, going to score it all out and I'm going to start again and let's see how that works out for me. So that's why I really love writing characters like that. I really like writing dilemmas like that. And it's not always the expected result. I've actually just written a book that's comes out at Christmas. And it's my first sort of true Christmassy book. And there are a whole load of dilemmas and long-term sort of complicated relationships in that one. And I had just had such a great time unpicking them all. I'm just looking at one of the questions that we've
yeah.
got in there. It says for Shari, how do you keep coming up with all these different ideas and managing to keep your books and characters so relatable? Oh, thank you to whoever wrote that question. That's lovely. Oh, that was from
From
Janice, I think.
Janice, who
Janice,
also seems to like Gary, by the way. She's said up
and
here
she
says
wrote
that
Gary.
she likes, but she
Oh,
loved how he just didn't.
hang on,
He wasn't willing to
Janice, can
waste
you read
time.
that out? It says,
Yeah.
so unpopular opinion here. I like Gary. He calls it like he sees it. And okay, he does lack maturity, but I loved how he wasn't just willing to waste time where and when he didn't want to. Don't some of us wish we could be like that?
Yes.
In some respects, yes. So
Not all.
this whole thing though, Janice, you've totally hit the nail on the head in terms of writing characters who are multi-dimensional. So Gary, you know, a lot of people will hate him for some of the things that he does in the book, but then there's other things that he does that other people will like. And I think that's the thing. I never have like characters in the book that are purely good or characters in the book that are purely bad, because that's not real life. I really like to try and keep my characters as human beings who are flawed, some more flawed than others. I mean, I don't want to give away any spoilers with Gary, so I'll just talk in general. There are characters that I thoroughly dislike when I write them. There was a book a couple of years ago, there was a book that had a character in it, Celeste, and I honestly, I couldn't bear this woman, but she was to me, she was a real person, and she was one of those people that you meet in life who are just thoroughly unlikable. But that didn't mean that she had no redeeming features whatsoever. So I try to write characters that have multi dimensions, and that must be interesting for you to read, Helen, for you to voice those characters.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, in initial, sometimes a first reading, you go, I just don't like them. But then you have to find their heart, you know, their reason for, and like you say, they're complex, you know, and people make mistakes, you know, at the end of the day. And I think in a lot of your books, people make mistakes and they kind of have to find their way through that. And that's what makes them human, because don't we all at the end of the day,
Yeah,
you
I
know?
don't know that we all make mistakes as bad as some of the characters in
No,
the books.
absolutely. Fair point. Fair point.
No, there's some real horrors in there. I mean, there are in the Rise and the Catch, there is, you know, characters in those books that have I'm actually just going back on what I just said, who have no redeeming features. And, over the years, I've probably written a few of those characters, but I think in general, most characters, the good ones have flaws, and the ones who are unlikable, they often have, one or two kind of redeeming features. So Catherine saying, Shari, they're in their late 20s. You're totally correct, Catherine. They're not quite 30 yet. It's the 30th anniversary of the mum and dad's wedding anniversary. So they're 20, 29. Okay. Let me
Lisa
just see.
Hemming's got a lovely comment here. "I'm so thankful I found your books." Isn't that nice, Shari?
Thank you. I'm thankful you found them too, Lisa. I get such a thrill when I think this is book 36 or 37, something like that. And it's when I get a message from someone and they say, I've just discovered your books, it's the biggest thrill ever, because I just think this is amazing. I've been doing this for a million years, and to find for someone new to come on board and say I've just found them is just the best feeling ever. I'm equally as grateful when new people find them, new readers find them, as when readers who've read them all. I got quite a lot of that in lockdown. I get a lot of comments from people who had just discovered the books and then went and read them all in lockdown, because obviously the time in their hands then, and it was just that aspect of lockdown was so lovely for me. Phoebe McLeod says, I think your audiobook narrators are amazing. That's you, Helen McAlpine, and Rossing on the American ones. Grace says, Las Vegas sounds like a fantastic setting. That's a really interesting comment, Grace, because I've had a couple of people who said, I don't tend to like books that are set in Las Vegas. And I completely understand that. And I did ponder it for a while. But Las Vegas as a setting, it's not a determining factor in the book. The reason that it's set in Vegas is because they're the circumstances of the first marriage. That was why I chose to set it in Vegas. But it's not what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, like people tearing up the town in Vegas. It's not that kind of book. Really, it could be set anywhere. The important thing is the story and the characters, not so much where it's set. And I think that tends to be the same in all my books, but it's definitely I would say that's true of this. Would you say that, Helen?
Yeah, I don't think it's a determining factor, but I think it adds to it. I think it, yeah, I think of course it could be, it's a story you could pick up and put anywhere, but I like it. There's something just slightly, uh, it's just a little bit wild about Vegas that I think lends itself to what happens in the book. There's a slight, um, lots of chaos happens, all these kind of things happen and misunderstandings and whatever, and I think it really lends itself to it. So yeah, I'm a big fan of it being in Vegas.
I
Yeah,
think one of
I
the
like
funny things was it's not necessarily where the two of the main characters would choose to be. So when Brenda and her husband Colin find out that their daughters are taking them to Vegas to celebrate their anniversary, they perhaps don't have the reaction that you would expect them to have. So I won't give you any spoilers, but I'll leave that one there. And that was one of my favorite things to write, because I just love that. I love that whole thing of when you're expecting someone to have a reaction and they have a completely different reaction. I love it. I love to write scenes like that in books, and you just,
yeah,
you've built something all up in your mind, and this is how they're going to react, and then they react in a completely different way. So I love to write
yeah.
scenes like that. Lisa said, "I love the catch and the rise. I just received my arc of the fall today, and I am so excited." So thank you so much, Lisa. The fall comes out in June. You've already voiced it, haven't you, Helen?
The fall, I'm doing right now. That's, the final one in the trilogy, and I'm doing it right now. It's due on Monday. So
That's
this is what I'm
Helen's
doing this week.
deadline.
That's my deadline. I'll get it in on Monday, and then some poor editor has to sit and listen to me. They're like, "Oh
Helen,
god, not her again."
how does it feel
What's
when
that?
you're how does it feel for you when you're going back to doing, so you did the rise, you did the catch, you did the fall, it's the same characters in them all. So how does it feel?
It's
Do you
nice.
have to go back and listen again? Or do you do those people live in you once you've voiced them? Do you know what I mean? Because when I've written a character, the character lives inside me somewhere. So
I I
do
I
you
th
feel
I what's nice is, I know them, and usually, particularly with leads, like the kind of 4 main or, 3 or 4 main characters in that book, yeah, I could go in and do them. Well, actually, it's really only Mirren and, Sarah. I do
yeah,
the blokes, but I don't do their chapters, if you know what I mean, so I feel like I know Sarah and Mirren pretty well. Yeah, that's fine, but it's also you do make characters decisions for different people, like West Lomax and things like that, that it's nice to go back and just make sure that you're still in the same world. But there are some books, like, as soon as one of yours comes up and Val's in it, no, that's good, like, I know she lives in me, absolutely. Um, but it's nice to go back when you're in a trilogy. I'm doing another trilogy of books that aren't yours. Not
you
just now,
say
yeah, but I've only done the
I get
second one of
paid
the
these.
I've got to pay the bills, Shari. So,
I'll share you. I'm happy
so
to share your
yeah.
brilliance.
So it's nice because you do feel like you get a sense of the world that they're in, and that's half the battle, because if you
Yeah,
know what world they're in, you can kind of go with it. But
yeah.
there's somebody asked a really nice question there about, what was your favorite character to write or narrate?
Okay, so for me, my favorite character or couple to write narrate. That's the questions from Scott's bookworm. Thank
Oh,
you. Okay, so my favorite characters will always be um this is a cop out because I'm naming more than one. So it will always be Josie Val and Carly Cooper, I think.
oh, yeah.
And then Shauna from the Story of Our Lives, because those characters had big chunks of me or people I love in them. So those Helen, you were just saying there, those characters. So like
Yeah.
Val just lives in my head all the time. And I could be doing something that's no relation to writing, and I can hear Val's voice telling me what to do, or telling me what I'm doing wrong, or telling me what I need to get my act together on. So those characters, I just know them. They're real people to me, and I really love them. And I put some of the things they went through, or things that I went through. I do tend to quite often write things that are based in my life or my friends' lives or people who I love's lives. So yeah, I would say that. And in terms of male characters, I think I've already mentioned Xander Lathe, the Rise and the Catch will always be that I will love him forever. Forever. What about you, Helen?
Uh, I love Carly Cooper, and I love, all the romantic journeys and adventures she goes on. I love doing those characters. Love doing Val. But I also love doing, and I think this is me.
Okay.
There was I can't remember the character's name now.
The
It was
mum
the
or the
mother.
daughter?
The mother.
Denise?
Mhm. Thought she was quite complex, and I think
Yes.
what was really interesting about her is that you got all of her because she was on her own, so you just got it was almost like a massive like, each chapter was a monologue of
Yeah.
outpouring and and so that I love doing that because I felt like you really got into who she was and how complex she was and how layered she was, and, it's
She
like you
was
say, you
an
didn't like her.
example. Yes, she was an example of a character who was not who people would regard as being unlikable in many ways, but she was complex at the
Yeah,
same.
and I just liked that. I just thought because yes, she was massively flawed, but when you see her her story, you see why that is. It doesn't excuse it, but it explains it. Do you know what I mean? And so,
Yes,
yeah, so I liked narrating that 'cause, like I say, it was almost like a just a ma like each chapter was a monologue from this woman, and I loved it, and I know it wasn't one of you I think you always said that it was a tricky one. So, yeah,
that was a tough one
it
for me
was
to write. If you've read that, you'll understand why. That was a tough book for me to write. So it goes back to what I was saying earlier. Some of my books are they don't all live in the same tone. So some of them, like this One Day With You, which came out in January, which thank you, incidentally, thank you. It's been #1 in the UK and in Australia and top 30, America, Canada, everywhere. Thank you so much. I'm over the moon with how well that one was received. And that one, oh my goodness, I was in floods of tears every day writing bits of that book, and it absolutely broke my heart in some parts of it. Whereas One Moment in Time, that one made me laugh a lot more. That one sort of had themes that were the kind of themes that you would talk about when you're with your pals, and of all ages, women of all ages. So yeah, I think the This Is Me was definitely one of the tougher ones for me to write. I can name about 5 books that I sobbed every single day writing, because again, when I'm seeing them in my mind, I'm feeling all the feelings of all the characters. So you can tell my husband will come in and I'll be lying like this over the table. What happened to someone, whatever, someone got their heart broken. And yeah, I love every emotion that's in these books. It explains a lot. We have a couple of more questions. As a fairly new reader of your books, I love the fact you include multi-generational characters in your stories. Do you base your older characters on people you know? And that's a message from Gay. Yes, that's 100%. My grannies and my aunties are all encapsulated in Val and in Josie and in Ada in this book. And let me just see if there's any questions. I want to just make sure that we don't miss any of the questions. Can you see any that I've missed here? Oh, is there a 24-hour period that you would love to relive? And if so, what changes would you have made? That's from
Ooh.
Laura. Ooh,
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a good one.
that's a
That
great
looks good.
question, Laura. I
Yeah.
don't
I'd
really know
relive
the answer to
I'd
this.
relive my wedding day, and
Would
I
you?
wouldn't yeah, but not I had a great wedding day, but it was mainly the things that I would change because I'd be thinner.
What are you
No,
changing,
joking.
Helen? That's the gossip.
Not the
I'll put
husband,
it in
not
the
the
next.
husband, I quite like him. I would
Tell
ch
me everything and I'll take notes. It'll all be in my next.
No, do you know one of the biggest I we were flying out on our honeymoon the next day, so I went to bed, uh, and I wish I hadn't got in my bed. I wish I'd just stayed up and got on the flight. That's what I wish I'd done differently. There you go. Um,
Really?
that was my big change, yeah. It's a small change, but, yeah,
No,
that's I
that's
would've
I loved my wedding day. For those of you who don't know my backstory, I met my husband and we decided to get married. He asked me to marry him 7 days later, and I said yes. I didn't even know his surname. It was a bit of a spontaneous decision. And we got married not that long afterwards. And yeah, my wedding day was fabulous. We took a big squad of family and friends on a bus to Gretna Green, and I wore my jeans on the way. I got changed into my wedding dress in the toilets. It's why I always say to people who are planning huge, big, extravagant weddings, like, good on you if that's what you want, but that's not a requirement to have a long and happy marriage. I always remember my flowers were a plastic Christmas decoration out of B&Q. They cost £3.99, and I just tied a bit of lace around them, and that's what I carried as my flowers going up the aisle at Gretna. So it was completely unclassy, but he's still here. So 30 years later, we're still on in there. So the flowers didn't put him off. So I think for me, it would be when my boys were small. So they would have been about 2 and 3 at the time. In fact, they were 1 and 2. And again, this is a kind of, I'll keep to the pamphlet edition of this story. I had not long started writing a newspaper column. I'd only had I had 3 books published, but in those days they were we didn't have ebooks or anything, so they were in shops. So I was right at the start of my writing career, wasn't making any money or anything. And my husband came in and he'd just been paid off from the company he worked for had just closed down his division with no warning whatsoever. And he walked back in the door at lunchtime. I said, why are you home? And he said, they've just closed our division down. And it was just shocking. And at that point in my writing career, so for any fellow writers out here, you'll feel the pain. My publisher had just told me they hated my next book. my agent at the time had just said they hated my next book. So I'd just about been fired by everybody. Nobody wanted my next book. So I was thinking my career was probably over. My husband was suddenly out of a job. I had 2 babies and a mortgage. And I'm thinking, what are we going to do? And later on that day, completely out of the blue, I got an email from CAA, which is an agency in Los Angeles, saying, we've just, look, your last book's just landed on our desk and we think that it's got potential for film or television. We'd like to represent you. So bearing in mind, I've got these 2 babies, I have no money, nothing. That was on the Tuesday, and by the Thursday, I was in Los Angeles. My husband and I just thought, we've got nothing to lose. We've already got nothing. We put a child under each arm, and off we went to Los Angeles, and we stayed there for 3 months, and we had the best time of our lives. We had zero money. We were paying for it for years afterwards, and we just had the best time. And that trip, that book never ever did sell to TV or movies, but we had the best time ever. And I think that one trip spawned about 5 or 6 books from the material I got when I was on that trip, and the people I met and the crazy things that happened. So it was one of those incredibly irresponsible decisions that I was talking about earlier that actually works out all right in the end.
Do you ever is there ever any talk that your books might do people still speak to you about turning it into a different format, you know, putting it on
So, I
television
mean,
or
yes, for sure.
I love that.
So we have an announcement coming in the next couple of weeks about one of the books, but I can't spoil that yet. So I won't mention that, but we do have an announcement coming. And I would say over the years, maybe 4 or 5 of my books have been optioned by TV or production companies, but none of them have been made as yet. But I live in hope. Wouldn't that be cool, Helen?
I
Helen,
live in hope for you.
you would have to be in
Well,
one.
I'll be receptionist this way, madam, because that's always the parts I play on television. I don't have the face for television. That's why I do. That's why
Yeah,
I do audio work. But
Helen,
yeah,
I
whenever
think you'd be
either that
great
or
as Sarah in one. Sarah in The Rise. You could be Sarah.
oh yeah, but she's much younger than me. I'm very old now. So
I
sorry, like although this light might be making me look. What age is she? She's in her 30s, isn't she?
Yes, you can pull it up. You can
Come on,
100% pull
Sarah. Come on, Sarah.
Georgina says, your wedding sounds enormous fun. It was an absolute hoot, Georgina. Thank you. We get a message from Mina. What is the best? Oh, that's a great question, Mina. What's the best writing, acting, narrating advice you've ever received? Helen, you go first. What's your best advice you've
Oh
received?
gosh. That's really tricky actually, because it depends what like whether it's narrating or acting. I don't know actually. I think the best advice I would give to myself, and I wish I
Hmm.
could give it to my younger self, is not to not to sweat it all so much. Like
Hmm.
enjoy it. Like I have so much fun now doing the jobs that I do, audiobooks, and I do like cartoons and things like that. I play a monkey in a Netflix thing, and you know, like just like get to do lots of voices. And I wish I could go back and tell my, 21-year-old newly graduated self that it'll all be fine. But I can't really specifically think of. Yeah, that's tricky actually. Narrating advice. th- I think somebody said to me, "You'll never please everyone all the time."
Right.
And I was like, "Well, that's very true because some people just won't like what I do, but
Yeah.
some people just won't like my voice. Some people, I've had people say they don't like a Scottish accent, and you go, okay, well, that's your thing. That you don't like it. There's not really much I can change about that. So I think it's about not sweating the small stuff. But gosh, that's really tricky. Maybe that's
Mm.
a really tricky question. Actually, I've found.
I think
What
in
would you
terms of
say?
the best writing advice that I've received, I don't know that again, I think it's probably more the advice that I've learned that I would love to go back and give my
Yeah.
younger self as a writer. So my first book was published in 2000, and I said earlier, I think I'm in book 37, 38. And oh my goodness, the highs and the lows, and the times when I've, thought, I'm going to go and get a different job. This is, this isn't worth it. And or it's not working out or whatever, like nobody's, it's never going to be a success again. And there's been sometimes when I've had huge successes and then, followed by sort of, there was a time earlier in my career when I had a massive success and I thought, okay, this is it, we're good now. And then that sort of fell away. It was when I was writing under a different pseudonym. So I think what I would say to my younger self and to anyone else who writes or who is going to write is just keep going. I sound like my granny. Just get up and do it, just keep going, because I'm now having, after 22 years, I'm having that overnight success where I'm having the biggest sales of my career, and I've just done 5 books in 8 months. It's because I had all these ideas in my head that I wanted to get out, and so I would just say keep going, because just when you think it's at your low point and you're not going to get any better, something comes up and it all turns around again. And I wish I'd known that, because you know what it's like in any job or any situation. When you're at your lowest point, you think, I'm never going to get out of this. And I just wish I'd known that it would all come good again. And as far as
perspective is a good thing, isn't it? Perspective.
yes,
It's something that I would say I've only
completely.
gained in recent years, like having a family
Yeah,
and things. It just gives you a whole different perspective on things, and it's a nice place to be,
completely.
I think. Yeah.
And another thing I think I would say in terms of writing advice, not that I'm equipped to give anyone advice, is that, so I have said many times before, I didn't go to college or university. I have no creative writing. I've never been to a creative writing class or what have you. I have never had a structure to my writing approach. I think I said earlier on, I just, write what comes into my head at any time. And I think I would say a lot of people say to me, how do you start writing? Or they think you've got to do a course first, or they think that you have got to have, the lots of free time to do it. So I wrote my first book between 10 o'clock at night and 3 o'clock in the morning over the space of 10 days. The first 10,000 words of my first book. And then after that, I've had 2 children, and my boys are 21 and 22, and they are so used, they were so used to me. I would be sitting outside in the car in the school run typing. They would be in sports centres, and I would be sitting outside with polystyrene cups of tea on my laptop writing. I think if you want to write, just write. Don't wait for the perfect time. Don't wait for the right moment. Don't think you've got to do some really expensive writing course. And I'm not for a second disparaging any of those things, because if that's what's right for you, that's great. But just don't think you need to do that. Because I certainly didn't. If you've got a story that you want to tell your story. And just if you've got half an hour to write in half an hour, and then if you get half an hour tomorrow to write in that half hour. You don't have to have the perfect setting and the perfect moment to do it. So that would be my advice. Did I sound wise there, Helen?
Wise like an owl.
I am never wise. I am the most unwise person I've ever
Listen,
met.
I've read your books, and if you're saying that a lot of them come from, your own experiences, yes, you're not wise.
I am not. There is no wisdom in here. I never go outside, so there is no vitamin D in this body, and there is no wisdom. I'm sorry, but there's plenty of escapades and lots of adventures, so stick with me on it.
But I do think
Oh,
I think that's a really nice bit of advice, that if you want to write,
just right. Yeah, if
yeah,
you've
I
got a
think that's a
story, just
lovely.
write it down.
If you've got a
You
story, and
can,
they say that everybody's got a story in them, don't they?
yeah, they
I've not
certainly
found mine yet. I'm very dull.
You'll have one. You'll have one. Okay, so I think we've answered all of the questions, Helen. Have I missed anyone? If I've missed any of the questions, I'm sorry, because I kept my glasses on specially so I could read this as well. But if I've missed any questions, quickly pop them in the comments before we sign off. I think we've probably got them all so far. Okay, so if there's anything that you think of afterwards, just pop your questions in the comments. This will stay on Facebook, and either Helen or I will come back and we'll answer. Sorry, there's one that has come in here. Helen, how do you get into audio work?
Uh, oh, yeah, well, I graduated in 2001. I trained as an actor, and I've done a lot of stage work and done a lot of bits and pieces of telly, and I was always kind of, I did a lot like voiceover work, but I was always in the kind of periphery of it. I did some audiobooks kind of here and there, and obviously with lockdown, um, we had kind of built a structure for a studio, and with lockdown coming, we just finished it. We started it, but we kept going off on tour. My husband's an actor as well, so jobs would come up, we'd go away and do a job, go on tour, come back, blah blah blah. But when lockdown happened, we kind of finished it, and it's the best thing I've ever done. So I now do a lot more a lot more audio work than I've ever done in the past, which is great. I absolutely love it. But I've got an acting agent, and I've got a few voice agents. I also have my own contacts. So it's basically just growing. It's one of those things that you start off doing commercials and things like that, and then you do, something, auditions come up and you do them, and you're lucky enough to get them or you're not. It's you've got to be in it to win it. So how did I get into just being an actor in Scotland? I think it used to be I suppose, that you would specialise in one thing. So if you were a theatre actor, you were a theatre actor, a film actor, you were that, voice actor, you did that. But in Scotland, um, you can kind of do lots of different things, and you're not really don't just do one thing. And so it just so happens that right now I've got a young family, and this really works for me. So I do a lot more of that. I'm doing a play just now as well, but
Are you? What's your play? Can you
uh,
tell us about it?
I'll tell you about that later. I'm not going to tell you about that. It's fine.
I'm totally
It's
going
fine.
to put
I'll
it
tell
all
you about that later.
all over my Facebook. I'll tell you all about it.
So that wasn't really very helpful at how to get into books, but agencies and things are usually but trying to get a voice agent can be quite tricky because they quite like a television personality for that, and I ain't one of those.
Right, right.
So, but yeah, that's how
Well,
how
I'm
it works.
so glad that you voice my books. It's the conversation that we have every single time I submit a new book. I get the email. I take it you want Helen to voice this? I'm like, yes, please. Right, we'll check if she's free. I don't know
You're the
what I'm doing.
best.
Just no. I honestly don't know what you. Don't ever say no, please,
I would
please.
never say no. I would
Thank
I
you.
would I would work a night shift to do your books, Shari,
Thank
if
you
I had to.
so much. Thank you. And I'm waiting forever to get you in work. Not that you need
You're the
me, but
best. You're the best.
honestly, every email, every single time I put a book in, do you want Helen? Yes, please. And if we're not, I don't want anyone else. If we can't have Helen, we're not.
Oh, she
You're
says
average.
all the
So
right
thank
things.
you so much for voicing all my books. You do such an incredible job. And thank you to everyone who has tuned in tonight. And just in case you missed it earlier, I just want to say a massive thank you. I'm going to do the game show hostess thing again because One Day with
You're up
You,
there.
it's up there, came out in January. And as I say, it's been the biggest success I've ever had. And I'm over the moon for that to happen. When I'm when I'm knackered and I've been doing it for this long, it's just been the biggest thrill. So thank you, thank you. And then what we were talking about, the book we were talking about today was One Moment in Time. It came out today. Thank you for everyone who's put comments in saying that they've read it and that they enjoyed it. Thank you for all the bloggers who've left great reviews. And if you haven't read it yet, I really hope you love it. And of course, the audio version, Helen voices beautifully. So thank
Oh,
you.
well, thanks very much, guys. Bye.
What were you going to say, Helen?